Good morning. Welcome to College Talk Tuesday. Pearl and Andy Lockwood College Prep. Good morning to you, my sweet.
Good morning, my sweet. Good morning, listeners.
Pearl coming off of her 600 and what consecutive day riding your little bicycle? Your little Peloton bicycle?
669.
Closing in on the big 700.
Yep.
Okay, that's every day, no breaks.
Oh.
Pretty intense. Pretty hard to live with sometimes, but
Thanks.
Inspirational.
Okay.
The intensity.
Two sides of the coin.
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about college stuff, meaning information about getting into college, about paying for college. Why should you even go to college? Sometimes we talk about SAT and ACT prep. Today, I wanted to cover three topics. Excuse me. One of which is some student loan malarkey, some hijinks going on in the world of student lending. I also, just wait. You're going to freak out. That's sarcasm. I also want to talk a little bit about social media and kids' presences on them and the percentage of admissions officers that think it's fair game to snoop and see what is happening on social media for kids' accounts. And I think we should also talk a little bit about verifications for financial aid information. I've gotten a few questions about that recently. Those are starting to happen.
Yes.
We should talk about that also.
Right.
So if you are just joining us, either live or on distant replay, say hi in the chat. If you have any questions, absolutely feel free to post them here because we want to make sure you're getting these answers that you may not be able to get otherwise from your high school or other parents. Frequently, both of those sources deliver a constant stream of misinformation.
Or partial information.
Yes.
Which can essentially be misinformation.
Fake news.
You don't have the whole picture.
Yeah. So we're here to give you our experiences. Of course, we don't claim to have a stranglehold on the truth, but you can decide. So feel free to ask us any questions, not necessarily limited to the topics that we're talking about today. Okay, so Navient, formerly known as Sallie Mae, big student lender, recently was forced or adjudicated to have to pay $22 million, which is really not a lot of money for big companies like that, but of interest and fines back to the federal government relating to stuff that had happened since the 80s. So just without overcomplicating it, because frankly, I understand it at a superficial level, a lot of student lenders received subsidies and guarantees from the government in order to make college education more accessible, to reduce the risk for lenders. And they were allowed to lend out, and receive 9.5% on their money, which is pretty good, even though that wasn't what the fair market bore at the time. And then interest rates dropped. And somehow, according to the suit, Sallie Mae, then Navient, was alleged to have sort of recycled those loans and continued to receive that 9.5% interest instead of dropping those those rates down to where they should have been according to the fair market. So finally, after all this that started with the Bush administration, they're finally being told to cough up more than $22 million worth of old money that they owe.
Of usurious fees they arguably took.
Well, from the government. So I just found this very interesting because right now there's all this talk about free college and forgiveness of loans and all that. And I certainly understand the impetus behind that as a student loan customer myself. But I think what gets lost in the discussion, which is really just basic economics, is like what maybe in the short term that's going to help, but what's the long term effect of doing that, of pumping all this this free money into the system? So number one, someone. There's no such thing as free money. It gets taken away from somewhere.
Someone's paying for it.
Yeah, someone's paying for it, and it's probably the person in the mirror when you get up in the morning and go to the bathroom. But the other thing is that it doesn't have, in my in my opinion, it doesn't really do anything to lower college costs. It actually does the opposite, because colleges don't have an incentive to reduce their costs if there's always going to be this pool of money out there to pay. And especially if it's going to be, if the loans are going to be forgiven. It's like the student gets to go for free or for next to free. So I don't think the things that are being proposed right now are necessarily going to be enacted. But I really wish that that Congress would take a longer term view of the ramifications of doing this, which is
something past the terms they hold.
Which I as I say that, I know that's ridiculous, but it's just the way the world works. So hopefully there's some sort of responsibility, but it doesn't look like that's going to be exercised.
Mm-hmm. True.
So, all right, next question, next topic. Social media. So 65%, I think Kaplan does a poll every year. 65% of admissions officers think that it is fair game to look at kids' social media profiles. That doesn't mean that they all do that. A lot of them are swamped. Particularly this year, roughly 35% of admissions officers admit that they will snoop around a little bit to see what's on social media profiles
of the students. Just throwing this out there to be a troublemaker. Do you think they view the social media of the students' parents?
I think I haven't seen any. I have not seen any information on that, but I think
wonder. I
think it's if they're snooping on the kids, why would they stop and not snoop on the parents?
Right.
Yeah. So on one hand, sometimes people say to me, "Well, I'm having my kid get rid of all social media profiles."
That looks obvious.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good tactic, because it might be a red flag to not have a social media profile at all. So I think, on the other hand, I think what you should do, or at least think about doing, is being strategic about this and scrubbing some of the embarrassing things. So I've told the story before. It's been probably more than a year. I remember when a client of ours, who really nice, good kid. She said, "Look, I have so much on my social media. Would you mind, going through and seeing if there's anything offensive there, and I can scrap it." Do you remember the story?
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Kristen. So I was like, okay, sure. So I found the time to start clicking through. I guess kids were on Facebook more back then. So I was clicking through, and she had like 300 pictures there or something. I'm clicking. It's all these photos of kids, good looking, the crowd that she hung around with, at different parties or different settings and at the beach. I'm like, wow, I'm starting to feel a little creepy clicking because I'm, because I'm like, middle-aged guy. These are like like blonde teenage kids. I'm in my basement. I'm like, so, but finally after like 120 photos, I couldn't stop,
you were doing your job. You said you
never,
would.
Yeah, never again. That was literally the last time I did that because of that. I'm just thinking, like, what if the FBI raided us and they saw on my, my history here?
We'd have a defense.
So, yeah. So, it'd be very confusing, I would think, between all the idiotic stuff that I'm interested in. So
aliens,
cigars,
and teenagers,
working out, basketball, golf, right? Anyway, so I finally found like a photo of her, at some like Sweet 16 or something, where they're all like, with their beers and stuff. I'm like, all right, so that's what should come down. So anything obvious, like, photos of smoking weed or, whatever, bongs, all that stuff should come down. Not because kids don't do that, just because
it's a judgment. It's showing the students' judgment of what to put or not put. And if you lack that judgment, it's definitely a window into what else do you lack in character and judgment.
Right. You're curating to put your best feet forward when you are putting the stuff out into the world. So college admissions people can see it. Employers will. I'm sure there's a much higher percentage of employers that look at this stuff.
Of course.
And who knows, your kids and your grandkids. This might be there in perpetuity. I think it will, until Congress breaks up Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and whatever. Okay. If you guys have any comments and experiences with this, pop them in here. Let me see who's here today. Travis, good morning. Tony Ann, Claire, Chuck, And Melissa. Good morning, guys. Nice to see you with us. Now, let's talk about some nitty-gritty stuff that only Pearl can opine on because she's in the thick of it. Let's talk about verification. So what is verification initially, and should you freak out if you are verified?
That was the first thing I was going to tell you what a verification is. Something not to get hysterical about. A verification is basically a deeper dive into some aspect of your financial aid application, be it your assets or your income. And that's one way, something about your financial aid application that gives rise to further questioning of income and asset. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But I also want to say at the outset, some schools will have verifications for all of its applicants. So that's another reason not to get hysterical. There are some schools that just as part of their own due diligence and investigation before it renders a financial aid decision will require a verification of some sort of all of its applicants. So, and then separate and apart from that, generally and at large, there are about 60% of applicants across the board that will be selected for verification at random without any reason it's happening. So separate that out. So number one, don't get hysterical. What you do want to do is answer the verification, see what they're asking for. Now, in the FAFSA, there is a tool called the IRS DRT, which enables us to port your actually filed IRS information with the IRS from the IRS site directly into the FAFSA site, unfettered, meaning it transfers and ends up being in the FAFSA and it indicates as transferred by the IRS, literally replacing your numbers because it wants to see that certainty of your income. So it requires this. Sometimes that mechanism, the IRS DRT, doesn't work for a variety of reasons. It could be as simple as you have an identity protection on your account, and therefore the IRS DRT will not work. Okay, in that case, you may, because the school hasn't seen the final expression in perfect form of your income numbers, require an income verification of you. Now, what does one do to respond to that if they don't have an IRS DRT that works? In that case, and most often it will be satisfied by ordering an IRS tax transcript of the operative year. In this case, it's 2019. Okay. Or you could be required to do what's called an asset verification. When would something like that come up? Well, let's say on your tax return that your financial aid formulas are based on shows a decent amount of distribution income or interest income from an investment that you hold. Yet, in your assets section on the forms, you are either saying you don't have any of such investments or a very low number that doesn't square up with what you're showing from that investment on your income tax return. So therefore, an asset verification may come up in that scenario, meaning what happened to the assets that gave rise to that information on your income tax return that we're not really seeing, that you're not otherwise disclosing on this form? Does it mean you're in trouble? Does it mean you're going to jail? No, I hope not. But it does mean
we typically recommend our clients stay out of jail
and stay honest on these forms. But it is going to require either an explanation, like the value went down since then, we sold it since then, whatever it is. This is all it is. Just because you hear a word, I had one client who actually, and it's an interesting thing to see how people interpret words that are in front of them, but a client of ours got a verification and started calling it an audit. I'm being audited. That's a misnomer. It may feel like that, but you're mischaracterizing it. It is not something to get nuts over. It doesn't mean, and once they find out, they're not going to give us anything, or they're not even going to let us borrow loans, or they're going to kick us out. No, relax, take a breath. They just need more information, and we're going to find out exactly what they need, and we'll provide it to them. That's it.
Now, to be fair, if there's something a little fugazi, like you had a whole bunch of money sitting in an account that generated interest and now it's not there, you will have to explain that. and there are legitimate reasons,
Of
which is, of course, the what we specialize in. And then there are other ways to make that paper trail that we don't specialize in. And you should be prepared anytime you complete a financial aid application. If you're going to be doing it yourself, you need to be prepared to defend everything that's on there. Sometimes there are things that are out of your control that happen, like this IRS data retrieval tool. It does make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes. We've talked about that in previous episodes. You have witnessed a handful of things this year, almost every year, that they've been using the data retrieval tool, where, for example, they treated a rollover of an IRA, which is, converting it from a regular IRA to a Roth IRA, or, something like that, as you have all that money in your account,
right?
As opposed to it's still a retirement account that should not be penalized. Things like that. Sometimes that happens, and you've got to be vigilant and on the lookout in case things don't really make sense for you when you ultimately file your financial aid applications and you see the calculation that they made for your expected family contribution. Mm-hmm. So that's not really a verification issue, but what I'm getting at is there's a lot of stuff that's out of your control. And sometimes they ask for stuff that they've already received.
Yes.
That happens probably more often than not, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
you just have to, take a breath.
Exactly. Take a breath. If you factually know you have sent something or you have the confirmation, they have it. They're just not that swift necessarily on updating the portal that you see, or calling back their last emails from telling you that something's missing.
Yeah.
If you know you've sent it, take a breath. And the other thing to understand and know is it all sorts out before the final decision is made at the school you ultimately go to. Pretty much they get it right in the end.
Good. So I see some questions and some comments coming in here. So if you have either, please pop them in here. Michelle Goldstein says this is really helpful. Thank you, guys. So thank you for that comment. All right. So Claire Werner. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Congratulations to Pearl.
Thanks.
You deserve that. Question about student loans. And she's basically asking, given the proposals that are floating around, should you load up on loans to get them forgiven? What's your answer? I think I have the same answer as you.
I think potentially right now, if you're concerned about being cash poor, and right now, historically speaking, the interest rate for the parent loan is at about 5.3. That's historically pretty low.
And student loans are in the threes.
Student loans are in the 2.75,
wow.
Right? So it's a cheap way to borrow money easily without, like if you were to do a personal loan with a bank or a cash out refinance, that is costly. There is a cost there.
Even a non-cash out refi, which we just did, which took about 4 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is probably one of the least cumbersome ways to get money. And there's no prepayment penalty should you decide not that you're no longer comfortable accruing that interest at 5.3 because you have maybe an investment that's beating it and therefore you want to take care of it or whatever. But it is certainly, it is certainly a very good option now. Even if you have the money, you may not want to pull it from investments. Maybe you're vulnerable with your job, and so you don't want to part with everything just yet.
So to answer your question, with the proposals, it's too early to tell. We don't know what the discharge or the forgiveness is going to look like.
They're not discharging parents,
but it's a low risk, like Pearl was saying, and so if you're unsure about whether you should take loans or not because they might be forgiven, we can't answer that. But if you do take the loans, they're pretty low interest rates right now.
Right, and I'm sorry, I'm going to reiterate though. Yeah. To be clear, the forgiveness that people are seeing right now because of the pandemic, in terms of you don't have to pay your student loans right now, it's the student loans, which are $5,500 the first year and $6,500 the second year and $7,500 in years 3 and 4, and however many more undergraduate years you need, it's $7,500 in those later years a year. That's it. This should not be confused with parent loans, which are generally much larger at a higher interest rate, those are not being discussed as being forgiven. Be careful.
The student loans right now, they're suspending the interest on them
Till
right
September
now.
of 21.
So there's no forgiveness right now in place. At some point, there may or may not be, but it's got to be worked out and put through committee and reconciled and all this other garbage.
Right.
Yeah. So it's too early to tell, but it's a very low risk because the rates are so low.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. What else? Any other questions before we wrap up here? Great answer. Peloton Pearl. Gary Heller says good morning. Hello to Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Esther Nefesh says good morning.
Good morning.
For once caught this live. All right. Yeah, Gary, I don't think for a second that student loans will be forgiven, but if they are, can I assume it will only be loans taken in my students' names
Yes.
as opposed to parents?
Assume that.
I think
only.
So.
Yes.
And then you just answered my question. Funny. See? Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
And Karen, will interest be charged retroactively? Right now,
That sounds illegal.
Yeah. Well, no, it could be just accrued. You know, the way a lot of loans work right now.
However you initially contracted is how it will be. They cannot.
Yeah. Sounds unlikely.
Right.
For the loans right now that are being suspended, I believe that they are not accumulating interest.
Right. And here's the other thing. Each year, student loans are taken out annually. Okay. So whatever portion you've taken out this year for the 2021 calendar year, that interest, those interest rates were set in July of 2020, as they will again be reset in July of 2021 for the school that follows their year that follows thereafter, from September or August 2021 through July 22. There will be a new set of interest rates set for that year. So as to the year that we're in and how that loan continues on until it becomes payable, which is 6 months after graduation, not that you can't make payments beforehand. There are no penalties for doing that. And that, of course, mitigates the accumulating interest. You are, what was I just getting lost into interest rates here? That doesn't change as to this year's loan that grows along and continues on until it's due. Next year, there will be, and it could be the same, but there will be a new set of interest rates as to the loan you take that year. And then that one travels on by itself.
Yeah, the rates are reset every July. If I had to bet, they're going to be at least the same, if not a little bit lower.
Right. I agree.
Because we're in an artificially low interest rate environment for political reasons. And it's only, to me, it seems like it's only going to continue for the near future until they have to go up again and the world ends.
On that note, have a great week.
Have a great weekend. Well, we should wrap up because it's. I think we hit all the points we wanted to hit. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Just pop a comment right here on this page. Thank you for being with us and for liking and sharing this information that helps us expand our reach to other parents who are just not getting this information from their high schools or elsewhere. So thanks. Have a great week.